Today we're going to do an antenna build. This is a 2-meter Yagi, something you can use for backpacking. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Kevin, K7SW. And today I wanted to make this video because I've had quite a number of requests, people asking me how I built this antenna, so I thought I would do a video and show you how I did it. So what I'm going to do is make a list of all the parts that you're going to need for building it and give you the dimensions and the measurements and the things that you can do. So stick around for the end of the video and I'll give you all that information. I built this antenna a number of years ago, and I keep it with me whenever we go camping, especially into the remote areas when I'm not allowed to take a lot of gear. I need something lightweight, but something that's going to work. If you've ever done any overlanding or multiple day camping trips, room is premium. This antenna is primarily for an HT. I'm using an RG174 coax feed with an SMA male end on it. And on the last few videos that I've made using this out camping, you can see how lightweight it is. It's easy to spin around. It's got its own little mast built in. And I think that's pretty handy, and this could benefit you. You can take it and set it up near a tree or a rock, even hang your HT on this thing and listen for that contact that you might have been waiting for, especially if it's a family member or someone that you're trying to meet up with. So here are the two reasons why I primarily put this antenna together. I needed something lightweight, something that's easy to put together, and something I could source with parts locally in case there was no ability to get these parts online. Although there will be links in the description below for all of these parts to buy them online in case you're not near a store. So here's the build. I'm using an arrow shaft, a 32-inch arrow shaft. I'm using music wire for the antenna elements. I'm also using an archery quiver connector or adapter. It's the kind of thing you stick your arrows in and it holds it together, so if you're on an ATV or you're whatever you're doing, the antennas aren't going to fall out of your bow setup. I'm not an archer, so I'm probably describing that wrong. And since I don't have any crimp adapters or the connectors or spare RG174 on hand, I just bought myself a 6-foot patch cord with SMA males on the end and cut it in half so I can use the other end one day to make another one of these antennas. And then lastly, to connect the coax feed to the driven element, the 2-meter boom that's going to be going across, I'm using the 2 little alligator clips here, and I connected that to the center conductor and the other side to the shield of the coax. And then I soldered those, I crimped them down to the alligator clip, soldered them in, and we're good to go. And one of the driving forces for me to make this antenna was to make it mechanically sound, meaning the parts won't fall off when you try to use it. Now I use these archery quiver mounts. I bought a pack of them and then I just cut each one individually because I only needed 3. And I put those on the boom itself because it fits an arrow perfectly. But mechanically, there's a problem with those things staying straight because the arrow can rotate around. Not like it will do it freely, but if you were to put your antennas on top of it, it wouldn't be straight across. So I needed to find a way to keep them even. And here's where I decided to use some 14-gauge wire, just insulated THN type stuff. I cut little pieces of that, maybe ½ inch or so long, about the thickness of these quiver mount brackets. And I used shrink wrap to hold that in place. And once I heat shrinked the tubing onto the arrow shaft, those little mounts wouldn't move. And now I have 3 mounts for the reflector, the driven element, and the director are all going to be mounted every time I put that quiver mount on top there. It has something to keep it in its place every single time. All right, on to the measurements here. Now the boom itself is 32 inches. There are 3 different elements and they are different lengths. The director, which is the far end of the antenna, that's going to be 36 inches, which is the actual length of the music wire. When you buy a music wire, it comes in 36-inch lengths. And where do you buy music wire? Well, you can get those at hobby stores. I found the pack that I was getting, the different variations, was at of all places, a hobby shop where they did model trains. Not sure what they use it there for, but it was a good idea for this project. All right, the driven element. There's going to be 2 sections of 19½ inches. That's comprised of 2 sections, and they're 2 19½ pieces, which gives you an overall length of 39 inches for the 2-meter half-wave element. Now the reflector is going to be 41 1/8. That's 41.125 inches long. The music wire is only 36 inches, so you're going to need a second piece of music wire to attach to this to make up the difference. I used a considerable overlay, about 3 inches long or so, and I sanded down the sides of the metal, soldered those together so they had a good connection, and used some marine grade shrink tubing that's got glue on the inside. So when that thing's sealed, it's going to keep the water out and keep it from rusting. All right, so to make these three elements, you're going to need one wire for the director. You're going to need two wires for the driven element, and two wires for the reflector to put that together. So that means you're going to need at least a set of 5 wires to go with. Music wire comes in a bunch of different sizes, and I picked 0.039 for my thickness. It's kind of in the middle where the thinner stuff is a little bit too flimsy for what I wanted for the purpose of this antenna. Now let's get to the measurements of where the elements are going to be placed on the boom itself. So starting at the back of the boom, we're going to go up 6 inches, and that's where we're going to be measuring out where our reflector is going to go. And for the driven element, we're going to measure 19 inches from the back of the boom up to where the driven element is going to be mounted. And lastly, the director is going to be mounted from the back of the boom, measure up 31 inches, and that's where we're going to locate that. Now, as far as the casing goes, the part that I put my antenna in, I built that because the antenna elements are pretty flimsy, they're pretty floppy, and so if you're hiking on a trail and it's sticking out of your backpack, which you could certainly do, and I did do that, you might poke the guy out behind you, you might poke his eye out, or they might get stuck in some branches and trees, and it's just kind of a mess. So I went out and bought some 1.5-inch tube, and I think I made it like 42 inches, so it's just barely longer than the antenna itself. And I put the black end caps on it, and now the antenna is encased. And one more modification I made to that tube was to drill a hole the size of the arrow shaft all the way through this mount. This way I can push the arrow shaft into the piece of PVC, and now it becomes the mast. And I can attach this mast to a bush, a chair, a table, or just hold it and give that thing a spin when I'm trying to find something directionally. Because the driven element has 2 halves to it, they can't be touching each other. And so what I chose to do is have them so that they're on the same plane together like this if you were to look down the antenna. But when you look at them from above, the wires literally are apart from each other. And when you clip the alligator clips on, you've got that isolation and the antenna works the way it should. Now let's take a look at the analyzer and go to the 2-meter band, and let's do a sweep here. Now looking at the dip here, we're going to be at 1.07 at 146.5. But let's take a look at a closer up view where the readings will be a little bit more accurate. So zooming into that, we're going to take a look at this. Now we see that the readings are 1.05 to 1 at 146.52. And that's a good thing because that's what we want, being the national calling frequency. Now when I weigh this antenna, the antenna elements and the coax, and put that on the scale, you can see it's only 3.5 ounces. Now when you put it inside this case, the tube that I put for it to protect everything, that comes at a whopping 1.25 pounds. And that's pretty much it. Remember, I'll put all the details for this antenna down in the description below, the measurements and all the parts, in case you wanted to try to find these and build them together yourself. Are there different ways of doing it? Absolutely. This is just the way I chose for the reasons I did, which is trying to find things locally. And because so much time has gone by since I made this antenna initially, there may be other options for attaching the elements themselves to the arrow shaft, and you'll have to do some research and some MacGyvering to figure that out. Now before you go, make sure you click on that like button down below, and if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing to get more videos like this. And if you want to see more videos on portable operating and antenna builds, check these out right here. Thanks for watching 7.3, and we'll see you on the next one.